Greater Sandton and beyond. Get ready for the SANDTON Times Hour
with your host,
Alexander.
Well, if you're listening to this tune, you know what time it is. It's time for the SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 FM, and as always, available as a podcast on Google, Apple, and Spotify. My name is Alexander Leitchman. This is edition 85, week 39 of 2022, and also of the SANDTON Times Hour. We're halfway through September 2022, and if you want to get in touch, you can email editor@sandtontimes.co.za. You can connect with us on social media at SANDTON Times, or visit the website www.sandtontimes.co.za. And if you're listening in real time on 93.8, well, you can connect with us on the WhatsApp line. You know the number. Send us your questions, your comments, your feedback. It's so good to hear from you, and you're part of the conversation. You're part of the SANDTON Times Hour Nation. If you're listening to this, as always, it is great to have you join in from all corners of the city, all corners of the country, and beyond, somewhere else in the world. And if you've left the SANDTON Times Hour a rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, well, I want to take this opportunity to thank you so much. It makes the world of difference, and it's great to have you supporting this important conversation. And as always, I'm happy to report that all is well in Sandton land. Vincenzo, back again, in action behind the mixing desk, which is great. Nice to see you, man. And a quick look at the week that was, or wasn't, thanks to load shedding. Boy, oh boy. What are we on now? Is it stage 5? Vincenzo, is it stage 6? What are we doing this week? Let me tell you right now, if South Africa were a restaurant, I think we'd all be all over TripAdvisor right now, complaining about the service, the management, the whole shebang. Anyway. So, what happened this week? What did I get up to? Well, I had a great day out today doing an advanced driving course with BMW, which was really lacquer. I've done 2 of them previously, but this was like ages ago. One with Mercedes-Benz and one with the VW, which was also great. But they do say you have to do a refresher. It was a day out of the office for me. It was great to brush up on some driving. And let me tell you, make the investment. If you've never done an advanced driving course, I really do find it unbelievably valuable. And especially in South Africa, right? I mean, you've seen how people drive on the roads. I mean, apart from the fact that we don't even adhere to red traffic lights anymore, and then when there's load shedding, it's absolute chaos. Let me move on. Went to a bourbon tasting last week to mark Bourbon Heritage Month, which is September. Got a chance to learn a little bit about bourbon whiskey. And here's 2 little things I picked up on. You're not allowed to add any colorants to bourbon to enhance the color. So you can't add any prune juice or any sort of colors that look like sort of rooibos tea. Whatever it comes out of the barrel as, that's what you have to bottle it as. And then bourbon is protected by the US federal government. So it's a bit like champagne and port. You can't go making your own bourbon in the hinterlands of the Karoo. No, that's it. Bourbon is, protected, trademarked, the whole lot by the US government. Then Proton. Don't know if you remember Proton. They were in the country a couple of years back. Well, they've relaunched in South Africa this past week with 2 new vehicles, which you'll be seeing on the roads, the X50 and the X70. 2 very nice cars. I mean, nothing wrong with them. Very smart. I know that there's talks that they're competing with the German luxury vehicle category. I don't think I totally agree. I think they're very much more in line with Haval and Chery and these upcoming brands, sort of, giving you real luxury with all the bells and whistles, but not at a ridiculous price. But we'll see. Let's see. Maybe you give it a test drive. Let me know what you think. Then TikTok hosted some select media for a presentation on their latest developments. And I'm going to try and see if we can get someone on about this from TikTok. Vincenzo, we must try and see if we can line someone up because some very interesting stuff coming out of there. So more of that in the coming weeks. Then there's a new sushi bar in Rosebank that we can go check out. Iki Bar. It's there by Tasha's in Rosebank, if you know where that is. It's a new upmarket cocktail bar and sushi spot. And let me tell you, everyone was there. I think I spoke to Sashi Naidu. I spoke to Dino from Survivor. We met in face-to-face. And a list of other people. Tons of social media people and celebrities and the whole lot. But it was a really fun night out. Ended up speaking to a surgeon from Baragwanath, which is a whole other story for a whole other day. And then Lego hosted a panel discussion on how important playing is this past week. Did you know that? Playing for your kids, very important. And the importance of creativity. Some amazing stuff that came out of that, and maybe we can even get someone to chat about that one of these days, because we don't let kids play enough, we don't let kids be creative enough, and maybe it's also technology that's also taking us away from doing things practically. Very interesting. Well, coming up in this week's episode, it's one of the most established online e-commerce platforms in South Africa, and this past week, the company made a bold announcement, and I've got the managing director joining me for more. Then domestic flights have skyrocketed in price, and at the same time, another local airline has gone into liquidation. So what next? Well, I've got an aviation expert to tell us more. After that, if you're invested in cryptocurrency, you would have been watching a major development this week, which could be a game changer. More in a moment. And finally, one of Greater Sandton's most popular country clubs will be celebrating a milestone next year, and I catch up with the general manager for a bit of a business update. Your headlines for the week are coming up shortly, but first, a bit of music to get us warmed up for this hour.
Follow the SANDTON Times on social media.
At SANDTON Times.
This is the SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 FM with Scatman by Scatman John. Such an incredible story. I'd still love to make a documentary one of these days about Scatman John. 1995, at the age of 53, John Paul Larkin, better known as Scatman, became a worldwide star after a lifetime of trauma, self-inflicted lockdown, and all of this because of his stutter. And then, can you believe it, 4 years later, he passed away. So he became successful at 53, and at 57, he passed away. So there's still hope for many of us. And it's great to see, earlier this year, I see they released a graphic novel about his life in Germany titled, Who's the Scatman? You need to go check that out. Time to take a look at your headlines for this week. Oh man, I spoke about this in the beginning. Load shedding continues. This past weekend, instead of improving things got darker as we escalated to stage 5 load shedding as a unit each at Kusile, Arnott, and Camden, as well as 2 units at Duva Power Station tripped. I mean, heaven knows what we're in for this week. I mean, last week in Greater Sandton, I can tell you right now, I think it was Wednesday, the power kept coming on and going off continuously for most of office hours. We had load shedding in the morning, and then the power never came back, and then it kept coming on and off and going on and off. Eventually, you have to unplug everything and just pretend like it's load shedding because your devices and your machines are going to take a heavy lock. And, I mean, how's this economy supposed to operate? You don't understand what it's like trying to run a digital media business when there's no power. And, I mean, you can get backup UPSs and all of this stuff, batteries. I mean, it only lasts for a certain period of time. And now the load shedding is getting so heavy, you don't even have time to recharge any of the stuff in between. I mean, there's a lot that's been said this past week about the state of the country and how it's managed. And for those who tend to get upset when people speak up, let's put it this way. If South Africa were your household or your business, I can safely say you'd most likely be getting your house in order sooner rather than later. Anyway, moving right along, petrol price coming down. The Automobile Association, better known as the AA, they say that petrol could see a sizable reduction in prices next month, something up to R1.24. Well, listen, I'll take it. I'll take R1.24. Geez, how expensive it is to drive to all these events and these launches and these things now with the current petrol price. Anyway, but diesel, which I think most of us are using for generators, could be going up as much as 50 cents a litre. Can you believe it? And then another last depressing story before we move on with more interesting conversations. The Rolex gang strikes again, and this time the victim is one of our former Chief Justices of South Africa. Wow. Have we not become a lawless society? And it just feels like nobody's doing anything about it. So Sunday World reports the Chief Justice was held up at gunpoint, having been followed home from a Sandton shopping centre. The gang jumped him at the entrance gate to his home. They forcefully removed the watch from his wrist. I believe he had a couple of injuries, but he's fine. And they even threatened to kill him. A Chief Justice! Good grief. They sped off in a silver Toyota Yaris hatchback and the Rolex timepiece. And now obviously police investigating and all of that stuff. But I mean, it's just unreal. Right, that's it for the headlines for this week. Grab your mouse and your keyboard as we connect with the managing director of Bid or Buy, Andy Higgins.
Connect with the SANDTON Times. Email editor@sandtontimes.co.za. Follow the SANDTON Times on social media.
At SANDTON Times.
All right, as we get the ball rolling on another episode of the SANTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 FM and also available on podcast. Some interesting developments in the world of business and in the world of tech this past week. I don't know about you, if you do any online shopping, if you've been changing your habits in terms of where you buy and how you buy. I must be honest, I'm going to be completely transparent. I've used our next guest's platform extensively. And you might know it as Bid or Buy, and it's been around for, gosh, it feels like it's been around for ages. But I'm thrilled to be joined by Andy Higgins. He's the managing director of Bob Group. And if you haven't heard of Bob Group, well, Andy's going to fill us in just now. But Andy, before we do that, how are things going on your side now that you've turned out a whole new child?
Yes, it does feel a little bit like that. Back to day one, it feels like. But it's exciting. It was actually quite overwhelming. We just made the announcement, and it was extremely well received in general by people. I was quite blown away, actually. Yeah, the reality of it is we've got our work cut out ahead of us. We've still got a lot to do. It's in startups. Well, the company, as you're saying, has been around a while. Actually, I launched it as a young 23-year-old in 1999, but we're going back to our startup roots. And the challenge is always around execution. So we kind of maybe dropped the ball a little bit, we feel, along the way, plateaued and allowed, the big blue company, no guesses for who that might be, dominate more in that space at the moment. But yeah, we have big plans to try and make a big impact moving forward.
Well, let's take a step backwards and let's go back to that business that you've been looking after for the last, what is it, like 20 odd plus years. Bid or Buy kicked off as this young startup in the 99. I mean, I remember I started working on websites back in 99, writing for some student websites. And I mean, it was the early days of the internet. I mean, I think we barely just got out of Yahoo as our search engine. We were starting to get to know a website called Google, if that's not even way too pioneering at that time. You ran Bid or Buy for an extensive period of time now. It's done, I think, very well. I mean, it's become part and parcel, I think, of South Africa's internet terminology. I think there's nobody who really doesn't know Bid or Buy. Very much buying and selling secondhand goods, also then going into newer goods. I know it became quite popular also with antiques and collectibles. Just reflect on that journey before we take a step into where you are going now.
Yeah, sure. So we kind of followed in the early days, the eBay model, which was more like this sort of open, laissez-faire sort of approach, where we kind of had this platform where we let the buyers and sellers sort of figure out most things on their own, like how's the buyer going to pay the seller and how the seller is going to ship it to the buyer and so on. But the reality is, over the years, that model has evolved more, and we haven't really adapted to that. So, then eBay back they had listed in North America and they were doing very well. And it was only later that sort of the Amazon model came in and sort of became more popular. And I guess that's in South Africa, what Takealot has built their business on is more the Amazon type model, which is a much more structured model. Yeah, so we want to adapt, but still not lose those sort of what we've created in those roots, which is more like community based. Especially like you mentioned with the collectibles, just that antiques, and we've got the guys trading stamps and militaria and all that sort of thing, which you don't get on these other sort of bigger platforms. So we definitely don't want to lose what we created with the community feel from the past, but we also feel we need to grow up a bit more and add more structure and more controls in place, also just to make sure that we can provide a good service to our community of buyers and sellers.
So what does that growing up now look like? I mean, that's kind of now coming back to your announcement that you've made this past week, that it is now going to become the Bob Group. There's been some mergers, some re-engineering of the business model. What are we going to know Bid or Buy as going forward?
So we want to be, people probably won't be familiar with it yet, but hopefully it will become popular. Our logo, which you don't see it at first, but when you look at it, it actually forms a hand. You have to tilt your head a bit to the right. And so we've built this is very intentional. So we want to build our brand around being that helping hand to our community, in particular our sellers. So we want to be more seller-centric, seller-focused, and providing them with the tools for them to sell online, not only on the marketplace, but we want to give them tools to sell through other channels, including their own websites. A lot of SMEs, they don't have the technical capabilities in-house to do all the integrations they need for online payments and for shipping. And we want to give them all those tools to be able to do that through multiple sales channels, not only the marketplace. Whereas some of our other competitors, they would be more focused specifically on their own marketplace. And then also they tend to be more what we'd call have a centralized logistics model. So you typically have to, as a seller, ship your products to their central distribution center, and they will then either keep them there or ship them in sort of what they call lead time orders, ship them on to the buyers. We opting for a more decentralized model, which is where we ship directly from the seller to the buyer, so you don't have those two hops in the process. And we think we can do that more efficiently from a cost and a time perspective as well. There's always pros and cons to whichever method, but we think that fits in well with us servicing the seller directly, because they can then use the same mechanisms for where they sell on other channels, and in particular through their own stores as well. And then it becomes a lot easier when you get into the nitty-gritty of like inventory management and that sort of thing. You don't have to manage inventory at multiple locations. So the decentralized versus the centralized logistics model. And then also, we don't sell anything ourselves. We just want to empower our merchants to be able to sell. A lot of the other models, they often have what we call first party and third party sales. So they'll actually to some extent compete against their own sellers, which we don't think is quite right. So we're really there just to empower their sellers and give them all the tools for them to be successful.
I mean, one space you've also played in is the classified section space, which has also been a very popular way of buying and selling online. We saw the demise of OLX overnight, which just disappeared. Is there still space for classifieds online, or has that model now evolved into, as you've mentioned, sort of the way Amazon or some of the bigger players sort of run online buying and selling?
I think it definitely still has a place, but it's very much more localized, right? So it's more for like within your community. So I think it tends to work better where you can go in person and meet with the person, because typically the classifieds platforms don't have like payment platforms or logistics platforms. So you really need to, it's really just a way of matchmaking, I think more like traditionally the newspapers would have done way in the past with classifieds, where you phone up the person or email them or contact them and say, I see you've got this boat or this car for sale. Can I come around? I see you it's down the road from me. Can I come and have a look at it? So I think there's definitely a place for that, but it's different. And whereas the pure e-commerce model is more like national and it's more controlled, and you can ship across province and all of that sort of thing. So it's place for both, but they service different things, I think.
I mean, I think it's certainly an interesting time up ahead for e-commerce in South Africa. I mean, we've had Kalahari.net, which eventually now became Takealot. You're evolving in the market in a very different way, bringing on sort of almost a bit of a competitor into the space. There's talks and aspirations that Amazon might enter the market in one way or another. What are your predictions over the next 6 to 12 months? Where do you see all of this unfolding?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's not official, but I think it's one of the worst kept secrets. Amazon is coming, and I mean the other one is Walmart have announced that they intend to purchase 100% of Massmart, who of course own Macro and Game and those brands. And if you look at other countries like India, for example, there's big wars between Amazon and Walmart, or the proxy for Walmart in India is called Flipkart. So I think we'll see something similar unfold here, but I do think it'll take longer than most people think or realize or maybe would like. These things don't happen super fast. It's not a big bang overnight change that's going to happen. So I think it's going to be fairly gradual. And I think at the end of the day, the consumer is going to be the winner, because, you're going to have all this competition, the incumbents, ourselves throwing our hat in the ring there as well. And they're going to just be spoiled for choice. Like I said, we aim to differentiate ourselves a bit from those traditional players, but I think it's going to be positive for the country. I mean, South Africa is still far behind the curve when it comes to online retail, right? We're probably not even at 3% of all retail is conducted online in South Africa at the moment. Compare that to even our emerging market counterparts, who are probably more between 10 and 20%. We've got a lot of catch up to play. So, there's a number of underlying infrastructure challenges, but I think all this is going to mean you're going to see the acceleration of e-commerce, and hopefully, which I've been waiting for my entire career, is some kind of a tipping point where we get, COVID to some extent impacted that, but I think we still got a long way to go.
Well, there you have it. It's Andy Higgins. He's the managing director of Bob Group. You might know it as Bid or Buy, the man who started all of that, and hoping that initial success continues now with a new name, a new vision. It's the bottom of the hour of the SANDTON Times on Mix 93.8 FM, and we're going to take a quick musical break.
Back for more?
The SANDTON Times Hour continues.
This is the SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 FM, and More Than I Can Say by Gamper and Dodoni. and DTE. Taking you into the second half of the SANDTON Times Hour, my name is Alexander Leitch, and you know the drill. If there's anything that sounded good during the show, but you didn't manage to get all the details, well, be sure to visit the show notes on www.sandtontimes.co.za for a detailed breakdown of everything and anything that we've discussed this week. Also, be sure to check out the social media accounts at SANDTON Times, and feel free to engage. You can send a tweet, a WhatsApp, a DM, a voice note, whatever works for you, and don't forget you can also use the hashtag SANDTON Times Hour. So, as I regularly do, we shift our focus over to the world of travel, tourism, hospitality, and of course, aviation. And as we're all starting to think about our summer holidays, I can't help but notice how local flights have just gotten significantly pricier. And in the same week as we hear Air Belgium landing in South Africa, we also hear that SA Express went into final liquidation. And here to chat about all things aviation and more, I'm joined by Guy Leitch, the publisher and editor of SA Flyer. And Guy, I mean, just to quickly recap here. So we've had SA Express in final liquidation. We've got Mango Airlines in limbo. And then we've got Kulula and British Airways, which closed their doors a couple of weeks ago for good. What does all of this mean for anyone wanting to catch a flight in South Africa?
Hi, nice to be with you, Alex. Where to start? The top line right now is that with the loss of Kulula and British Airways, we've lost about 40% of the supply, of the seat supply. So in a sense that there's an immediate shortage of seats of 40%, but that's a hypothetical number because what we've also seen is a massive ramp up in prices, which we can talk about in a minute as to why. But the ramp up in prices has meant that a lot of people who might have otherwise considered flying are no longer flying, which has obviously brought down demand. But we've still got probably between a 10 and 20% undersupply and over demand for the available seats, which is one of the reasons why the prices have gone up for the rest of the year. Because just as the other airlines begin to build up capacity to replace that lost by Kulula in particular, we'll get into the Christmas end of the year season and that Christmas rush, and that'll keep prices high. So it's not for at least another 6 months that I'm expecting prices to drop to what we might describe as a new normal. If you'd like me to briefly talk about why the prices have become so expensive, well, there are a couple of reasons for that. One of the key drivers is the fact that the airline industry in South Africa was just super competitive. It was hyper competitive. And that is why we've seen over the last 10 years leading up to COVID in 2000, the failure of so many airlines or just the ability for so many to get going. You might remember Velvet Sky, for instance, as one, Inter-Air as another. So many, there were contenders and so many just failed to get off, actually, in a sense, off the ground. Because the industry is intensely capital intensive, obviously acquiring aircraft, all that goes into operating them. And the margins were absolutely paper thin, if not actually underwater. Why would they have been underwater? Well, because the major competitors in the industry were SAA and Mango, both of which are state-owned, and for that matter, SA Express, all of which are state-owned, and many argued that, in fact, they were flying at competitive prices, which is why they were losing money. So what we've seen is a massive shakeout in the industry. We've seen closure, and it's a total closure, of British Airways and Kulula. And we've seen probably the closure of Mango, although there is a lot of noise about it getting back in the air. I don't give it more than a 50% chance at this stage. And of course, as you mentioned in your introduction, we've also seen the closure, the final closure of SA Express. I have to say, no one's particularly lamenting the loss of SA Express because it always had a superb competitor in the form of SA Airlink, now just called Airlink. And we've seen also the rapid rise of SEMAIR. So we've now got two regional airlines, again, operating to connect South Africa to the rest of Southern Africa, as far afield as Mauritius, Accra even, and so on. SA Express was really an airline that needed to be put out of its misery and grounded. But we are definitely seeing a loss of connectivity, which means that people are not just going to be able to travel down to Auntie Ethel in Cape Town from Joburg for a birthday at the drop of a hat. I think those days are probably gone.
So, Guy, basically what we're saying is the industry fine with just having Lyft, Kemair, Airlink, and FlySafair? I mean, does that suffice for now?
It's not enough for now, which is why we're going to battle for the rest of the year and and into the new year. But the other airlines, the remaining or the surviving airlines, are growing at an absolutely unprecedented, phenomenally fast rate. Surf Air is getting 5 new aircraft, or a couple of them already arrived. These are Boeing 737-800s, they're 183 seaters. So there's a lot of capacity coming back into the market already. Lift is gearing up with more Airbus A320s, heading for 5 aircraft in their fleet. Airlink, which is now the biggest airline in Africa in terms of the number of sectors or flights flown, is still operating on the old Golden Triangle, which is the Joburg, Cape Town, Durban routes, as is SAMAir. And these airlines are also networking at a tremendous rate, so that they're creating code share arrangements with, for instance, Emirates. So you're able to buy a ticket on Emirates from Bloemfontein and fly to Joburg and then fly on to Dubai with just an Emirates ticket, even though you're flying with Surf Air or Airlink. So the whole industry has changed a hell of a lot. There will be a shortage of supply for the next 6 months. But then, as I said, I think that we will, capitalism abhors a vacuum, as they say. So we'll get to that correct price point between supply and demand, and it'll all match up. But the net effect is that we will have to live at higher prices.
Well, I mean, we've also got oil prices around the world that have been fluctuating probably more upwards than downwards. So I'm assuming that December holidays might be a little bit of a pricier one in 2022.
Very much so. Oil prices from the airline's perspective have basically tripled, gone up 300% from around about $35 a barrel to $120 a barrel at a peak. Yes, they're on their way down again. They may continue to come down, but we don't know what the demand for the oil over the European winter is going to be, given the lack of supply from Russia. So it's a big question mark. Certainly, I think that the airline industry is going to have to learn to live with oil prices in the region of $100 a barrel. And that's going to have a huge knock-on impact to the prices of airline tickets, because for a well-run airline which keeps its costs tightly under control, the cost of fuel is around about 35 to 40% of its total operating costs. So you can see how that is the single biggest price of cost that airlines bear. And if that cost goes up 300%, it just has a huge knock-on effect to ticket prices.
Well, there you have it. Guy Leitch, publisher and editor of SA Flyer, doing a quick catch-up with us on the state of our local airlines. And as we've said, you might be in for a little bit of a pricier holiday if you're looking to get on a plane and fly to anywhere in South Africa. Guy Leitch, thank you so much for joining us on the SANDTON Times Hour.
Online, on air,
Anywhere, anytime.
this is the SANDTON Times Hour.
A bit of a change of pace as we look towards money and business and investments. And for some people, you might have been tracking some of the latest developments happening in the space of cryptocurrency in terms of digital investment and digital finance. And one of those stories that's emerged over the last week is around Ethereum. And here to give us a bit of context and what it all means is Hope Robertson. Brett, thank goodness we've spoken to Sean Sanders, your CEO, a couple of weeks ago. So I think we have a bit of context in terms of Revix and where you fit in. But let's talk about Ethereum. And just give us a broad overview of what is Ethereum and where does it fit into the ginormous world of cryptocurrency.
Thanks so much for having me on. So for most people, I think they know Ethereum is the second biggest cryptocurrency in the world, and it's quite sparsely different to that of Bitcoin. Whereas Bitcoin's trying to be this, native digital gold reserve asset of the blockchain network, Ethereum is kind of a different beast entirely, and it tries to be this general purpose blockchain. Now, I know most people listening might be like, well, what on earth is a general purpose blockchain, right? And basically what this means is Ethereum's trying to be the programmable platform for anything and everything. It's trying to be the decentralized computer of the world, so to speak, or a software platform of the world, where anyone can kind of just go on and create or build these things called decentralized applications or DApps. And basically what that is like your normal app on your phone, right? You have Facebook, you have Instagram or whatever you have on there, but that runs off an iOS system or an Apple, the Apple iOS system, basically. These apps are a bit different. They run off a blockchain. Instead of being on the centralized server, they'll run off a decentralized server, so to speak. And Ethereum is kind of the forefront of this. And this was all kind of built through this breakthrough technology of smart contracts, right? So basically, they're trying to just take on the iOS system, the Apple system of application building.
Right. So Ethereum is sort of like the brother or the sister to Bitcoin. It's the euro to the US dollar, however you want to, whatever analogy you want to use. It's in the running in terms of the big cryptocurrencies in the world. And this week there's been something very interesting. There's been a development in Ethereum, and it's been referred to as the Ethereum merge. Now what does that mean?
Yeah, sure thing. So this is quite a technical topic, but I'm going to try and not make it as technical and not get too much into the details of it. But basically, the Ethereum merge is this process in which Ethereum has decided to transition the way, well, it's called a proof of work consensus mechanism, is what it currently runs on. And they're trying to transition that to something called a proof of stake consensus mechanism. Now, again, listeners might not know what any of this kind of means. And it's kind of understandable because it's, complex, fancy tech terms being thrown around everywhere. But I'll try to break it down. And basically, a consensus mechanism is literally a fancy tech way of people saying, a process in which a blockchain agrees that a transaction is valid. And so basically, Ethereum is just trying to change the process in which its network agrees that a transaction is valid and can be added to its blockchain. Now, there's two kind of ways that they agree. There's either a proof of stake way or a proof of work way. And without diving into the technicals, the proof of work way basically relies on these complex computers to solve this really difficult math equation to kind of prove that work was done, and hence the name proof of work. And once this work is done, it allows everyone on the blockchain to kind of get into agreement that we can add these valid transactions. So it's a very complex and energy intensive way. This proof of stake way, you can kind of think of it as a way where you buy a stock in a company, right? They use a stake instead of you having to mine an equation. And they say, well, if you own a stake in Ethereum, you're probably not going to act badly because you have a vested interest in this company. And if you do act badly, we're just going to take your stake away. So it's way less energy intensive, and it costs you 32 ETH to become a person that can help validate these transactions. But there's a lot of kind of benefits that come with this proof of stake way over the proof of work way. But back to the merge and like what this kind of all means is basically, I kind of like to use the analogy, imagine Ethereum is this petrol car kind of going down a highway. The merge basically just wants to take its current petrol engine out, which is this proof of work way of making the network agree, and substitute it with an electrical engine, which is this proof of stake way of making the network agree. But they've got to kind of do this without stopping the car. So it's pretty complex, and it represents probably the biggest upgrade in cryptocurrency history. And as you said yesterday, it kind of went through, it was successful, and now Ethereum's agreement system is now on a stake basis instead of a work basis, basically.
So when any kind of business processes change, I mean, even if you invested in traditional companies or if you invested in anything and there's some major development of this kind, there's always some sort of ramification. So what does this mean to anybody who is invested or who was looking at investing in Ethereum? Has there been any sort of significant shift? Has the price increased in the long run? I mean, for the rest of the year, are we going to be seeing any sort of major movements on Ethereum?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's one we get a lot because there have been some significant differences when the shift kind of happens, right? And there's kind of three main benefits I look at here that are kind of directly affecting ETH's price going forward, as you kind of mentioned now. And the first is that by transitioning to this proof of stake system, ETH it reduces the amount of Ethereum it actually prints by 90%. So, I mean, we've all kind of seen how bad money printing's gone for around the world. Ethereum was printing 5.5 million ETH per year, just pushing it out into existence. And this was to pay these miners or validators. Now with the new system, it's dropping to 600,000 ETH. So it's a 90% reduction in the amount that they print. And what that means is it kind of does two things. ETH becomes more scarce, which is great for a value asset. And ETH is actually possibly becoming deflationary, which, from Economics 101, if you kind of just reduce the supply of something and keep the demand the same, prices tend to kind of go up, right?
Yeah.
That's the one benefit. It's like the stop in printing or a huge reduction in printing, which is very beneficial. The second benefit of it is the ETH's energy usage that it was using for proof of work, the amount of energy it was using to secure a network was the equivalent to 0.2% of the world's energy usage per year. That's how big it was. And by changing over to proof of stake, they're reducing that by 99.95%. So, I mean, you can't really fathom it, but it's effectively going to zero, the amount of energy it's going to use. And this opens up a massive door for Ethereum becoming a front runner in ESG investments, which is a huge area. So if ETH could become the green crypto, you kind of open this door to massive institutional investments. I mean, there's something like $47 trillion worth of ESG investments around the world. So if ETH becomes the front runner in crypto, you can just imagine those kind of flows that come into Ethereum and what will happen to the price moving forward. That's like your second main benefit, is they could become the green crypto. And then finally, most people don't know this, but all these miners from the proof of work system, it was really expensive to run. It was a huge electricity cost. As we saw, 0.2% of the world's energy was being used on this. That's really expensive. So these miners were actually selling all the ETH that they were getting rewarded. And it was something around $7 billion of ETH was being sold every year by miners. That's gone now. There's no more miners. So that's quite a huge positive, because that selling pressure constantly kept down the price of ETH. And that's kind of been removed. So that's what we see as like the three main benefits here. It's a deflationary asset now. It's possibly the green asset into crypto. And we've removed all this miners' negative sell pressure that's been hitting ETH for years now. And those are literally directly translating into the price of ETH going forward.
Well, certainly interesting times in the cryptocurrency space, especially for Ethereum. Unpredictable, but certainly, a bit of an educated look at what's happened with Ethereum over the last week. And I thank you, Hope Robertson, Head of Investments at Revix, and definitely somebody who's got his finger on the pulse and who knows what's going on in the space of cryptocurrency and digital assets. And with that, we're going to take a quick musical break, and we'll be right back after this.
Connect with the SANTON Times. Email editor@santontimes.co.za.
This is the SANTON Times Hour, and as we come into the final stretch, we're seen out with Gala with Freed from Desire here on Mix 93.8 FM. And one last chat before we wrap it all up again for a week. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Paul Leishman. He's the general manager at the Bryanston Country Club. And the club is going to be celebrating 75 years in 2023. That is quite a remarkable milestone. But I thought, let's have a quick catch up before we get to that milestone. And Paul, it's great to have you on the SANTON Times Hour. And Paul, tell us a bit more about the Bryanston Country Club. How are things going on your side of the world?
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for the opportunity. It really has been quite exciting times. Obviously, COVID was tough for everybody and created a lot of hard work, and they're just trying to survive and get through it and that. But, as soon as the hard lockdown was down, we saw a huge resurgence in people wanting to use the club, and that the club regained a lot of attraction for people. I think people evaluated their lifestyles. We're getting more and more people just wanting to be part of a place where they can escape from the big city, and that we've certainly seen. So our membership actually is at a record high now, and that's, we were doing fairly well before COVID. COVID obviously created a bit of a bump in the road, but post that, we've really seen a resurgence in that. We've seen a resurgence in people wanting to get involved in outdoor activities. So all our outdoor, golf throughout the world took off amazingly. We've seen a huge resurgence in tennis and even our bowls. And, one of the things that really grew a lot through COVID was our walking trail. So we had a walking trail that we just established about 4 years before COVID, and we used to get a few people walking it and that. And then obviously with COVID and, when we had those couple of hours a day that we were allowed to walk and things like that the walking trail suddenly took off, and it's become a really big part of the club now. It was a lovely 4.2 kilometer walking trail. And it really, I do it a couple of times a week when I get a chance, and it helps you get away from the big city vibe, and that you actually feel like you're completely out in the country.
Well, it's good to hear. I've certainly had a chance to play 1 or 2 rounds of golf at the Bryanston Country Club, and I think it was the country club's great. I don't know if the golf was great, but that's another story for another day. But certainly a great space to be able to get out, and it's interesting to hear that people are sort of finding a new life when it comes to country clubs. And you've got sporting facilities. You obviously also have hospitality spaces where people can have lunches and host private functions. So, there's a lot of those things happening in and around the country club. As you gear up for the 75th anniversary, are there any sort of major redevelopment plans in place? Are you looking at upgrading stuff? Is there anything new coming into the club now that you've found sort of this new life post-pandemic?
We certainly have, over the last 10 years. I mean, if you came to Bryanston 10 years ago, you wouldn't recognize it today. It has gone through a major refurbishment. So we've upgraded all our facilities, our restaurant, and that's been upgraded nicely. All our function rooms have been upgraded. The golf course is looking better than it's looked ever, and that we're constantly busy upgrading all the areas and that. So we do have a good 10-year capital plan that we're rolling out different upgrades and that. What we've done in the last year that's been really successful is that we built a new kids play area. So that's been a great addition. Our terrace and restaurant area, we've expanded. So we've created a new gin bar, and our staff call it Cape Town. So it's a bottom platform that's a little bit lower than the original terrace. We've got our live entertainment and that on the Fridays and Sundays, which are really popular. So our restaurant area really, there's a fantastic vibe from the family side and that. And then what we did last year as well was we completed it in March this year, was we did a huge big upgrade to our driving range. We've built with partnership with Titleist. We've got the Titleist National Fitment Centre, and My Golf Pro have also got a fitment centre there. We've got a covered academy for our teaching pros, and that's been fantastic. I mean, it's a really magnificent facility where you come along if you're a golfer and you can get your clubs specifically fitted for you, and that it's the best of a kind in the country and that. And I mean, it's been fantastic. We've seen 100% increase in use of our driving range through this new facility. So that's exciting. And then we took the plunge, and now we're busy finalising our plans for paddle. So paddle's obviously something that's also taken off in South Africa. And we created pickleball a couple of years ago. So we're constantly looking at all these exciting new sports that, we keep saying to ourselves, if we had to rebuild the club today, so if we started today and built a club for Bryanston Country Club, what would we have?
Well, that certainly sounds very promising. And a quick update there from the Bryanston Country Club. Paul Leishman, who's the general manager, giving us a little bit of a taste of what's to be expected as the club heads towards its 75th anniversary in 2023. I believe celebrations start kicking off from May onwards, but we'll probably chat one more time before we get to that, if not on the anniversary itself. And Paul, I thank you for making the time to be on the SANDTON Times Hour. And that's it for another SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 FM, and is always available as a podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify. You can email us on editor@santontimes.co.za, or you can connect with us on social media at SANDTON Times and visit the website santontimes.co.za for all the stories and more. Well, you can always feel free to send through your questions or comments whenever you want to, during the week or during the show, or whenever you've got a free time. And I'd like to thank you for making the time to listen. Of course, all our guests who made the time to be on the show this week. And as always, Vincenzo, thank you for doing your magic behind the desk. And thank you to the SANDTON Times team, as well as everyone on Mix 93.8 FM. Thank you one more time for listening, and let's connect again next week.
That's it for this week. Thanks for listening to the SANDTON Times Hour. And if you enjoyed it, be sure to share it.